How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, January 4th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, following the conclusion of all of Week 17 NFL games, this is the actual playoff picture going into the playoffs this season, as these are the 14 teams that grinded this season, that performed and exceeded expectations to make it into the extended playoff. And from now on, if you lose, you're out. Every game is elimination, and there can only be one champion at the end of this, who will go down as the champion in the 2020-21 quarantine NFL season. It'll be very interesting to see what happens, but with the conclusion of these games, we get to see how the playoff picture looks. So I'm just going to start with the AFC just to show how that season finished out. So, with the number one pick in the AFC and the current holders of the first round bye are the AFC West champions and the defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, who came off their last game against the Chargers after just sitting all their players. They finished with a 14-2 record. They clinched the division and they clinched home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs going into the Super Bowl. And they're the only team in the AFC that will not face a team going into the first round. They will face the lowest seed of whichever team advances through the first round. The second seed will go to the Buffalo Bills, who, coming off of their last win against the Dolphins, finished their season with the AFC East title at 13-3. And with a clinched division, they finished with the number 2 seed overall in the AFC. And for their first matchup, they are going to face off against the Indianapolis Colts, who finished with an 11-5 record, which, if you're keeping track, they are 2 games below. They had a record that was 2 games worse than the Buffalo Bills. So that's going to be one of the first matchups of this season, as it will be the first matchup of the wild card, as it'll take place on Saturday, January 9th at 1:05 on CBS. That'll be a very interesting matchup as we see these two teams face off against one another, because the Buffalo Bills have been very hot coming in, and because they're going to be playing in Buffalo, it seems as though that may be a home field advantage, considering the Colts play in a dome, but they still play in a cold weather city. We'll see what Phillip Rivers does in his first playoff appearance with the Indianapolis Colts, with the offensive line that he does have, and with the solid defense that Darius Leonard brings, along with, let's see if they're able to stop the Buffalo Bills' air raid offense in this wild card matchup. So, following the Buffalo Bills, the third seed will go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who would win the AFC North with a 12-4 record, as they finished above the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns, who are both in this playoff picture, by the way. The Pittsburgh Steelers with this win, they would finish with a 12-4 record, which would sit them a game behind the Buffalo Bills and a game ahead of the Tennessee Titans. Remembering that they were the team that started off 11-0, they lost 4 of their last 5 games. But of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers are still a playoff team. They're sitting comfortably, and going into the playoffs, they are going to host the Cleveland Browns for the opening game of the their wild card matchup. It'll be the final game on Sunday, January 10th on NBC at 8:15, as it is one of the divisional matchups that people are just waiting to see. It's going to be very interesting just to see how that game plays out, because both teams have been pushed. For the Cleveland Browns, remember, people have been criticizing Baker Mayfield, but Baker Mayfield was the first starting quarterback since 2002 to get the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs, and he's been able to do so in amazing fashion, and their defense is pretty strong. And let's not forget, the Steelers they're a great team, a very talented team, but a team that's been falling off in recent weeks. So there's very possible that the Cleveland Browns could go to Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers. I have no idea as to how that's going to happen, but if I were to predict, I would think that the Cleveland Browns are going to beat the Steelers, just like I think the Buffalo Bills are going to beat the Colts at home. And then jumping into the final matchup, finishing with the AFC South title, the Tennessee Titans would finish with an 11-5 record, which would tie the Colts. But because the Titans had the tiebreaker over the Colts, they finished with the division lead, whereas the Colts went to the wild card. But with this win, they would finish 1 game below the Steelers, and they would have the same record as the team that they're facing in the first round or in the wild card of the playoffs, the Baltimore Ravens. So going into this matchup, which will be on Sunday at 1:05, it's the first, like I just said, it's the first game on Sunday. It's going to be on ABC, ESPN. It'll be a very interesting matchup as this was the series this was a matchup from last year in which the Tennessee Titans beat the Ravens in order to go to the AFC Championship game against the Patriots, in which the Tennessee Titans defense exposed Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson gets a chance at retribution. He gets a chance of showing the NFL that he actually can win in the playoffs. But we'll see that from him. That's the narrative that's being created with this playoff game. But it'll be very interesting to see what these 11-5 teams do going in. It'll be interesting with Tennessee holding home field advantage and Derrick Henry being a running back that not many defenses can stop. But I think going into the playoffs, the Baltimore Ravens are the hotter team, even though it hasn't looked like it. Like on paper, the Baltimore Ravens are a hotter team. They have a lot more momentum. I think the Ravens beat the Titans pretty easily going in, but it'll be very interesting to see how it all plays out. And jumping to the NFC side of things, the team that would clinch the first round bye in the NFC would be the Green Bay Packers, led by their goated quarterback Aaron Rodgers, as they finish with a 13-3 record, which would clinch the NFC North and would beat out the Saints and the Seahawks for the NFC title by a game, as they won their last game against the Bears, because they actually had to win that game in order to clinch the first round bye. I think they, alongside the Chiefs, put up incredible seasons alongside one another. Both their quarterbacks, I mean, the argument is up in the air as to which quarterback deserves the MVP. Aaron Rodgers put up an incredible season where he threw for 48 touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes, had he played his last game, would have easily finished with 5,000 yards on the season. But great season overall from the Green Bay Packers. And even though they lost Bakhtiari, they are still the team to beat in the NFC going in. So, going into the first matchup of the NFC, the second seed would go to the New Orleans Saints, who'd finish with a 12-4 record despite their starting quarterback Drew Brees being out for a month and Taysom Hill taking over. They were able to win their division by a game over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and especially with their win over the Panthers, they were able to hold the second seed over the Carolina Panthers. So, going into their first game of the playoffs, they are going into the wild card week. They are going to host the Chicago Bears on Sunday afternoon at 4:40 on CBS. And the way it's looking, first of all, I think the New Orleans Saints are going to destroy the Chicago Bears in their stadium, even though I think the Bears are a great team and the Saints are a warm weather team, which probably could benefit the Chicago Bears if they're playing in a warmer stadium. But if New Orleans is playing in their city and they're this hot and Drew Brees is still completing 70% of his passes, I think the Saints kind of take this one very easily. But of course, the Bears the Bears are still an incredible they're an incredible team. Let's not forget that Nick Foles did lead a playoff run through the playoffs before he won the Super Bowl. So I mean, anything is very possible. And the Saints have had a lot of bad luck in the playoffs recently. The Bears could beat them, and considering Drew Brees has had to face off against the Bears on multiple occasions throughout his career with the Saints, I think it's only fitting that the Saints play the Bears for this matchup in the NFC playoff picture. So behind the Saints, sitting third, winning the NFC West, was the Seattle Seahawks, who finished with a 12-4 record. The Saints own the tiebreaker over the Seahawks, so the Saints got the number 2 pick, but the Seahawks were able to win their division by 2 games following their win against the 49ers. And the Rams were able to beat the Cardinals to get the second place spot in that division. So it's only fitting that the only other divisional matchup other than the Steelers and Browns be the Seattle Seahawks and the Los Angeles Rams, as these two teams did happen to go back and forth this season. But this time, because it is January, it's going to be colder. I think the Seahawks playing at home are going to have an advantage over the Los Angeles Rams, even though the Los Angeles Rams are the most recent out of the two to make the Super Bowl. Of course, look out for Aaron Donald naturally, but I think that Russell Wilson will take it to the air, and I think that Russell Wilson will take the Seahawks to a different gear. And I think I think that the Seahawks are going to dispose of the Rams pretty easily. But nonetheless, it'll still be a very interesting game when it plays, and it'll be on Saturday at 4:40, as that's the Saturday afternoon game. And just having it being played in Seattle, I think the Rams are definitely a team that can beat the Seahawks. Don't get me wrong. I just think that the Seahawks win this game and advance to the next round, because I just think having a cold stadium will benefit them, or it'll be a bigger disadvantage to the Rams than it will be an advantage to the Seahawks. And then last but not least, clinching the fourth spot in the NFC would be the Washington football team, who would finish with a 7-9 record after beating the Eagles and would win the dumpster fire that was the NFC East. Also in that division, like the Cowboys and the Giants were waiting to see if they lost, and they finished 6-10, and those teams very easily could have made the playoffs with 6 wins in their season. But the Washington football team made it out. Chase Young put up an incredible defensive performance this entire season, and just the way they were able to navigate their quarterback situation and get Alex Smith back in there, it's been kind of admirable. But Washington, they will sit at 7-9, and for the wild card matchup, they will host Tom Brady and the Buccaneers on Saturday night at 8:15. And I think the Buccaneers will win this one pretty easily, but the Washington football team are still a very dangerous team. They are still a playoff team. I wouldn't count out a team that has absolutely nothing to lose going into this playoff series. They're very, very dangerous. And I think going into the playoffs, there's a lot. Any team is susceptible to being upset. I think that Washington doesn't win this game, but of course, an upset in any of these games could happen. But it'll be interesting because with no fans, I think home field advantage will be less of a factor unless you're a cold weather team. But a lot of factors go into this, but this is what the wild card playoff is looking. This is what the playoff picture is looking like going into the wild card round. And of course, I'm going to make another video following the wild card round, previewing what's going to happen going into the divisional round. But with that said, I want to thank everyone once again for listening to all 12 and a half minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. Today is Monday, January 4th, 2021 out here in this quarantine. I want to thank you once again for listening to this piece, and peace out. I'll catch you with another installment after this.